And we are recording with Mr. Jeff Nyquist on Saturday, July 1st, 2023 at 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time. Guys, please go into the description and follow Mr. Nyquist on Twitter and go buy his books. Those links are in the description. And as I was just telling you beforehand, some people have been commenting on the live chat on my video game stream the last couple nights, and they were saying I need to have you on in wake of the entire whatever it was that we saw in Russia last Saturday, Sunday-ish. And you were just saying coincidences concerning July 11th. So what are those coincidences?
Uh, well, the July 1st and July 11th, the first coincidence is that Prigozhin, who led a mutiny a week ago today against the government in Moscow, specifically targeting the Ministry of Defense, but it was aimed at Mr. Putin. He balked Mr. Putin's rendition of why they're fighting in Ukraine. And Mr. Prigozhin's the head of the PMC Wagner, the PMC private military company Wagner. It's been fighting in Ukraine. They've got mercenaries in the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. And of course, he's been criticizing the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, and he's been criticizing the chief of the Russian General Staff, General Gerasimov, and actually very nasty comments on social media that Mr. Prigozhin has made since I think around February. I don't know, February, March is when I started watching his podcast. And it's so the response of the Ministry of Defense was to say that July 1st, today, was the deadline that all of the PMC Wagner mercenaries have to become, sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. They have to work directly for the Ministry of Defense. Now, another coincidence, July 1st coincidence, is that the Russian Federation announced in like late March that they were going to move nuclear weapons into Belarus, and that the date that they wanted Belarus ready to receive the weapons, the latest date was July 1st. So they have these two July 1st. Mr. Prigozhin has to get his mercenaries in with the Ministry of Defense by July 1st, and nuclear weapons are going to Belarus, Russia by July 1st. Now, this is very funny because Mr. Prigozhin is going to Belarus, has gone to Belarus now, where the nuclear weapons are going, and 5,000 to 8,000, according to common news reports, 5,000 to 8,000 of his mercenaries are going to Belarus, of all things. You revolt against the Russian government, and you get to go where the nuclear weapons are being moved to. Mr. Lukashenko 2 or 3 days ago said, "Oh yeah, we've got lots of nuclear weapons. They're arriving in large numbers, and the West doesn't even know where they are." Well, this is very odd, because, of course, Mr. Putin and Mr. Medvedev, the former president of the Russian Federation, have been saying, we're not bluffing. We can use nuclear weapons if we get into trouble here in Ukraine, and they're in trouble in Ukraine. The trouble manifested June 6th when they blew the Kakhovka Dam up and created tremendous flooding. Because why? Because the Ukrainian army was intending to cross the river by Kherson, and they blew up the dam to flood the river so no crossing could take place. You can't cross a river while it's flooding when a dam is broken. And of course, the bank gets all muddy, so it kind of makes it more difficult to cross later. But the water's gone down, the summer's been hot, and the water subsided to its normal channel. And guess what? They started crossing a week ago today, and their bridgehead, the Ukrainian bridgehead, is expanding. And the Russians don't have the troops on their left flank in the southwest of their front to probably hold that. They're going to have to start withdrawing. So Russia's in a bad position. There's been some reports that Russia's broken through. Russia's first line of fortifications has been breached by the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are going very slow. They're being very methodical. They're using, shaping attacks. They're finding the weaknesses. They're using their HIMAR artillery. They're taking down drones and destroying Russian electronic countermeasures. So it's a very funny coincidence that Belarusia gets nuclear weapons now. Because if nuclear weapons are given to Belarus and they launch them on Poland, on the supply line that runs from the west into Ukraine, does that end the war? Does that cause the West to come and negotiate with Russia? What is it? Does it allow Russia to win the war without Russia receiving a retaliatory attack? Does Putin care what happens to Belarus if Belarus receives a nuclear retaliation? I don't know. It's very weird. And then you have on the 11th of July, you have the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, right near Belarus, where you don't have much warning time of a missile coming in. They've beefed up the ballistic missile defenses there. They've brought in radiation detection equipment in the Baltic states to check the borders. They're getting, and already, Poland last September, I think it was, August to September, Poland started passing out the potassium iodine pills and getting them ready for the schools and different civilian areas because Poland was possibly, they were being threatened. They have been threatened. Mr. Medvedev has threatened them. Russian generals have threatened Poland with nuclear attack over the years. This is getting rather serious because Russia's stated military doctrine is if their conventional forces don't hold up, they reserve the right to use their nukes. And that's what they excel at. They have the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. They have modern nukes. They have modernized it. We haven't modernized ours. And so this is kind of disturbing. And then what makes, I would dismiss July 11th. Why would they attack that meeting? But then I'm looking at Russian propaganda websites, like this particular Indian site, where they give out the news. And a lot of the Indian sites give a kind of a pro-Russian twist because India has been allied with Russia for decades. And they're saying that World War III, there's this bogus story, I'm sure it's bogus, that Victoria Nuland, the usual villain with regard to Ukraine, supposedly told the Ukrainian leaders recently that World War III is going to start on the 11th of July. And of course, the CIA and NATO is going to start the war, because this is Russian propaganda. They never start anything. So the Russians themselves are putting out this disinformation that World War III begins on the 11th. You have the NATO summit on the 11th. You have Prigozhin going to Belarus by the 1st, and the nuclear weapons reaching there by the 1st. They've both come early before that deadline date. And Prigozhin's mercenaries. Now, here's the icing on the cake. The Russian historian now my name, I've just had a hiccup. The Russian historian Felchtinsky, Yuri Felchtinsky, wrote a book with the Ukrainian co-author called Blowing Up Ukraine. He'd done the book Blowing Up Russia with Alexander Litvinenko, who was famously poisoned with polonium-210 in London in 2006. Well, this book has a funny prediction in it. And this book came out last year. It said that the intention of Russia in this war is to move nuclear weapons into Belarus and to use them in Belarus. So when Professor or Dr. Felchtinsky was interviewed by Jonathan Fink of the Silicon Curtain podcast here in April, he was kind of probing, Jonathan Fink was probing him about this attack from Belarus, and very, very curiously, Mr. Felchtinsky said that a group of so-called supposed Ukrainian partisans or whatever would seize the nukes in Belarus and fire them at NATO as a provocation, so that there would be 2 degrees of separation between the Kremlin
Say
and
that sentence again.
So Felchtinsky said in April, he said Ukrainians would be ostensibly, they would allege that Ukrainians had gotten the nuclear weapons, had somehow gotten the codes to launch them and seize them. Some pro-Ukrainian militant group would seize the weapons in Belarus. Now get this. So the weapons arrive, are arriving over the last 10 days or so in Ukraine, the nuclear weapon, arriving in Belarus in the last 10 days or so. And so is Prigozhin and 5,000 of his mercenaries. And the Russian press is claiming, and Putin has alluded to the fact that Mr. Prigozhin is really an agent of the Ukrainians, that he secretly met with the SBU, Ukrainian intelligence, that he was paid $6.2 billion by the CIA to change sides. So you see how it's being set up here. Now, why does Putin allow them to go there? Why aren't they rounded up and jailed or shot or whatever? But no, Mr. Putin said in his speech on Monday, president of the Russian Federation, that the Wagner mercenaries have a choice. They could just go home. They could go join the Russian army and fight in Ukraine, or they can go to Belarus. So it's a great big question mark. Like, what? That's out of the way. Why would they let them go there? And why all these coincidences in dates where the Russian propaganda is lining up with these actions? And Mr. Felstinsky, of course, when he wrote this book, he talked to oligarchs, he talked to people high up in the former Soviet structures, and he himself has contacts in Russia. So where did he get this from? Mr. Felstinsky didn't draw this out of, because prediction is science. When somebody says something and it comes true, wait a minute, how did he know that? He isn't a psychic. He's a historian. So he, in his investigations and his research, he came across this very unusual piece of information, and he has repeated it in a way that you can't ignore it now. You can't ignore what he said because it's coming true in a very eerie way. What in the heck are Wagner mercenaries doing? And the other thing, I saw news items that are purport satellite photographs of them building the encampment here a few days ago, building the encampment for the Wagner mercenaries in Belarus. Well, wait a minute. How long does it take for me to get a paint contractor out to paint my house? That's awfully fast service.
Yeah.
To be setting up barracks for people who just committed a coup, less than a week ago. That's pretty fast. That means that's planning. Whose planning is that? This is not these events in Belarus. So you go back to the events. These events in Russia a week ago were not spontaneous. This has been prepared. In fact, if our not always on the ball CIA knew about this enough to brief Congress before the Prigozhin mutiny happened, the efficient Russian intelligence services and GRU knew about it. Well, not only do I think they knew about it, I think that they were involved in it. And there's a thing called provocation in Russia where, right, okay, let's say you're losing a war and you're the Russian, Federation leaders, and you're worried about a mutiny of your army. So how do you inoculate yourself against the mutiny of generals and troops? Well, you stage a fake mutiny and you see who joins it and you promptly arrest them.
Yeah.
Right. So then everybody looks around and goes, wait a minute, that mutiny was a fake. And then when conditions get worse, you're not going to have a mutiny, because if somebody mutinies for real, everyone will say, oh, no, that's not real. It's a fake. So nobody's going to believe a real mutiny and join it when it happens, because they've basically seen a fake mutiny. They go, oh, that's just another fake mutiny. And now Putin has inoculated himself against further mutinies in his own military, which is interesting. General Armageddon was arrested. I don't know. Someone on my site wrote that he had been questioned and released, but Sergei Surovkin, the General Armageddon, who was famous for, dropping phosphorus shells on Syrian towns and burning them down and carpet bombing them. He's the head of the Aerospace Command now. He was the head of Army Group South in the invasion, but he's now the head of the Aerospace Command, which is in charge of the missile and air interceptors for their air defense, especially in a nuclear war. But he was supposedly questioned or arrested or detained. But how many people got discovered in this fake, I'm calling it a fake, mutiny? How many people exposed themselves as being not happy with the regime and now are being led away into jail cells? Don't know. I do know that according to various reports, that FSB troops and army troops joined Prigozhin's march on Moscow, which means what's going to happen to those guys? Are they all going away to the Gulag? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who's going to ever join a mutiny again? How can you, and see, this is how totalitarian regimes secure their, you could say, secure their people against rebellion, because everybody knows about provocation, because they've done it over and over again.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I tend to be of the I'm of the belief that it was fake. It was fake to draw out traitors to the regime.
Yeah.
Yeah, now no one's gonna. It'd be like if Trump told all of his followers to go to the Capitol. No one's ever going.
Yeah,
Not
you're
not
right about
again.
that.
Not again.
That's a very good example. You're right about that.
Well,
Yeah, nobody's going to do that now, are they?
dude, I saw the funniest fucking meme, and it's Ray Epps dressed as a Wagner guy, and he's going, "I think we should go into the
Yes,
Kremlin."
I saw that. I saw that one. Yeah, I saw
but
that.
but yeah. So, but whatever it is, man, it just I keep saying this. It's like whatever we saw wasn't it. It was too that my first gut instinct when it was happening. I'll admit, I was like, oh, this is a coup, and I imagined it was, you
Yeah,
know, fragility, and they're going to move Putin. He's older, and everyone hates him, and the CIA. I'm like, yeah, sure. Why wouldn't this be a coup? That's kind of law of the land in Russia, right? It's just like strong man. But when nothing happened and he just sent him home, I was like, that's not a Putin move. A
no,
Putin move is you have Prigozhin executed on the lawn.
yeah,
Like,
right.
and when that didn't happen, I was like, dude, that's not Soviet KGB to be like, hey, go back home now. No, that's you and your family's family are all decapitated on TV. So that's kind of my thoughts on that but this is curious. The July 11th
Yeah,
is there's so much misdirection now.
yeah. There's misdirection, and of course, it could be that this is just a very sophisticated way to threaten nuclear war.
Sure.
That people
Yeah.
like me are looking at this going, holy crap, they put Wagner in there to do a false flag nuclear attack on NATO, and attribute it to Ukrainian SBU intelligence trying to get NATO into the war. Because of course the Russian line has been, and you listen to all the Russian. Look, I listened to Scott Ritter this morning. Scott Ritter, who got arrested for soliciting an underage girl on the internet and went to prison. Scott Ritter, the former arms control inspector that used to be a Tiger, and suddenly, instead of being an arms control inspector against Saddam Hussein in Russia, where he did arms control inspection, he's sort of turned pro Saddam, and he sort of turned pro and anti-American and pro Russia. He's a very much a pro Russian guy on the blogs, and of course he's got this wonderful rap about how there was no negotiation with Prigozhin, that Putin stood strong, and the army and the public came out for Putin. But of course, if you listen to all the mainstream commentators, they're saying there was no demonstration in favor of Putin. Everybody, society was just sort of standing there, sitting there on their butts, and everyone was paralyzed. No one wanted to do anything unless it was those people caught up in marching to Moscow. So, uh, you know, there's two versions, and always see when you can tell when there's a lie coming out of Russia, and China does it almost the same, but the Russians are the artists at this. They don't tell you one story. They tell you several different stories. So it's like you're in the shopping mall and you get to like chop and choose the one that fits you the best. So depending on your state of knowledge, they've got the primitive version for the people that are visceral, and they look at Prigozhin, dressing down the defense minister in video after video, and you look at him claiming that his troops were attacked by a Russian
Strike.
army brigade, and he captures the brigade commander, and they beat him into a confession, and he apologizes for bombarding them. This kind of drama that's played out on Russian social media. And so you got this version that Prigozhin is just fed up to here with all the lies from Moscow, and so he's marching on it, as if some guy who, by the way, the Ministry of Defense, the Russian government, the Ministry of Defense has paid the Wagner PMC mercenaries over $1 billion since the war started.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go up against your paymaster?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't understand. They're paying you.
yeah.
I don't get it. So that's the simple version. Now, the more complicated version, for the more sophisticated, you get the more sophisticated people. And he goes, well, Prigozhin, he controls all these mines in Africa, diamond mines and gold mines, and he's operating in the Central African Republic, and his mercenaries virtually control some of these countries like Mali and Libya, and they're all over there. And so he's making a ton of money off of that. And Sergei Shoigu is jealous of him. And so Shoigu has formed his own mercenary company, and he wants to dissolve Wagner PMC and push Prigozhin out of the way, and he wants his mercenaries to come in there and grab the money. That's another version that we hear of where this dispute started. But of course, the dispute itself is phony as a $2 bill when you see them let them go to Belarusia, to Belarus. What? That's out of the way. It's like, what kind of scenario is being set up next? It's like and for your next assignment, Mr. Phelps, now your government will deny any knowledge of we will
Yeah.
deny that we had anything to do with what you've done.
You can go shopping for multiple different conspiracies.
Right. Whatever. And then the really pro-Russians believe that it's the CIA has bought Mr. Prigozhin for $62 billion, and that he's working for the Ukrainian SBU. And his mission now is he's managed to negotiate. He's fooled the stupid Mr. President Lukashenko into harboring him, because Mr. Lukashenko supposedly did this negotiation over this mutiny to prevent a civil war. That's what Scott Ritter is all about, preventing. Putin brilliantly prevented a civil war, Like, where would these mercenaries have gotten all the shells and artillery and air power they would have needed to actually fight a civil war?
Not only that, real mutiny. You're mowing that convoy down on the highway
Oh, yeah. Yep.
12 hours before it gets there.
It's the highway of death, like we
Yeah,
had in
yeah, no,
Iraq.
right. You're not putting guys with sandbags in Moscow's going, oh Lord, here they come.
Yeah, you get the Moscow militia, that's the Moscow police. You get them coming out there and putting up machine gun positions when there's tank carriers with T-90 tanks in them barreling towards you. It's like, that's ridiculous. The whole
No.
thing is, and by the way, where was the Felix Dzerzhinsky regiment? Where were the very well equipped, yeah, I used to call them KGB troops, but the FSB troops that guard the Kremlin? Where were they? Why didn't anybody mention them? They can't be disappeared. What did we just make them go away? I mean, that government is defended by, motorized rifle division or regiments that are stationed around Moscow. There's no way that a force like that could get anywhere near Moscow. So what in the heck was this? It doesn't register as legit on any scale. And look at two prominent Russians fell out of windows last week. One was the head of a bank. She was a very beautiful lady. She fell from the 11th floor of her flat. So this death by falling out of windows, this is really becoming an epidemic in Russia, especially for people with money. And it's like, if Prigozhin was speaking out against the government and referred to Putin, I think in April or something, as a old grandpa, why didn't he fall out of a window? Because I'm sure that whatever these other people did was not as bad as what Mr.
Yeah.
Prigozhin was doing publicly for months, for weeks.
Yeah. And then you got
Beating up and torturing a Russian brigade commander, a lieutenant colonel, because he allegedly opened fire on their forces, and nothing is done. The Ministry of Defense does nothing about that.
Yeah, and then you have Putin releasing that video, and he's like, the only thing that cannot be forgiven is betrayal. I think that was a legitimate statement, but I don't think it was aimed at Prigozhin.
No, and let's talk about Wagner. People try to brag them up as some kind of elite organization. Wagner mercenaries are recruited from criminals. Mr. Prigozhin himself is a former jailbird from the Soviet Union. He's sort of an organized crime kind of dude. He's been a friend of Putin. He was called Putin's chef or caterer. And with these totalitarian regimes, if you're a chauffeur, or if you're a valet, or you're a bodyguard, you can end up becoming a governor or the head of a company because you've become trusted. The top guy knows you, he trusts you, he gives you these opportunities. And of course, why would Mr. Prigozhin, who is basically an oligarch and probably a billionaire, who has took in 86 billion rubles since the war began in payments for what he's doing in Ukraine, let alone his operations in Africa. Do you think he's really going to jeopardize all that by mouthing off first and then doing this bizarre march? It sounds crazy.
Well, even that devil's advocate, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I could see him do that. Yeah, you're just going for money and power. It's never enough. But the events we have seen since then, I think, deny that that was ever a
Oh
reality.
yeah.
On the
Well, it's
face
a reality.
value,
Well,
face
if you look at
value, sure,
yeah,
mercenary guy with billions. Yeah, why wouldn't you go for the throne?
but Mr. Prigozhin isn't a mercenary in the sense of the West. Mr. Prigozhin is a Mr. Prigozhin is a creature and always has been a creature of the Kremlin since the Kremlin aligned itself with the organized crime world. When even before the Soviet Union collapsed, the KGB was working with Russian organized crime. After all, they had them all in the Gulag.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
they let him out because they wanted to create this phony capitalist system that was really controlled by the secret structures of the Communist Party and the KGB. So you've got all these Siloviki, those are KGB and military people controlling everything. I mean, everyone around Mr. Putin were hardline communist and KGB people. I mean, the KGB was the armed detachment of the Communist Party Soviet Union. So
yeah.
these are the people, and Mr. Prigozhin I mean, you could say that he's a psychopath. So psychopaths have um, a low sense of risk, right? So he might not know the danger of what he's doing, but he's been around a long time. He's not a young man. He's not inexperienced. He knows exactly what the power is that he's going up against. So for him to have these emotional rants about dead criminals who he recruited from the jails is very, very odd, because this guy's is a war criminal. His units have committed war crimes. It's not like he's some righteous guy, his march for justice. I mean, it doesn't resonate with this guy's resume and who he's been, operating gambling casinos, operating troll farms, um, you know, operating these mercenaries in Africa that they're doing a lot of dirty business. I mean, you think about the level of trust, and Mr. Putin has lied about Wagner in the past. Last year, when Macron went to the Kremlin to talk to Putin about the war, he asked him about Wagner PMC, and Putin said, "Oh, that has nothing to do with the government. Wagner doesn't have any." And yet, we find out now that they've been paid more than $1 billion since the start of the war by the Russian government. So all these lies on top of these lies, and of course, the most bizarre thing. I mean, the only thing that would even give me pause that Prigozhin was honest was that before he began his mutiny, he did a broadcast in which he said that all of Putin's reasons for going to war against Ukraine were lies. There are no Nazis to put down in Ukraine, and there's no threat from NATO through Ukraine. It's just all bogus. Now, if they're going to paint Mr. Prigozhin as an agent of the SBU of the Ukrainians, he's got to say what the Russian media says is Ukrainian propaganda, even though that actually happens to be true. There are no Nazis running Ukraine, and there was no threat to NATO. It was all coming the other way. It was Russia annexing Crimea and starting a war in Donbass, and now Russia invading Ukraine. Not like anybody has lined up troops to invade Russia. I mean, it's just out of the way. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody's crazy enough to attack the biggest nuclear power in the world. So, all these, I mean, if you analyze it, it just doesn't make sense. But when you see them going to Belarus and these other dates lining up, and what Mr. Yuri Felchinsky had said in April, and what his book said last year about, oh, they're going to move. And it's interesting what Mr. Felchinsky said about moving nuclear weapons to Belarus. Did you know that Belarus never got rid of the infrastructure for maintaining nukes on its soil, where Ukraine did? Because you can't just house nuclear weapons anywhere.
Yeah.
Requires special facilities. You have to have electrical hookups for the warheads, because the warheads don't just sit there. They have to be maintained.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have a constant electrical charge. And so you have to have reliable facilities for maintaining warheads and for servicing them. And so all those things, they never got rid of them in Belarus. And one of Felchinsky's points is, why did they never get rid of it? And his other point is, why did Russia never just annex Belarus? Why did he leave it independent? Because he needs it to do this thing. And he said if they were just threatening NATO with nukes by moving that, it would be better if he moved the nukes into Kaliningrad. It would be better if he just some Russian submarine came into Kaliningrad and dropped the nukes off, or some ship dropped them off. Then you would have you would have the nukes right, and that would really scare Europe to have them that far west, to have Russian nuclear missiles that far west. But no, it's Belarusia. Not, this isn't just to scare. This is what Felczynski argues. Very interesting argument is they really intend to use them.
And there obviously there's always layers and layers and layers to this shit. But I mean,
yes,
part of me is like, man, if you're not going to broadcast you're moving the nukes, right? But then if I can
yeah, that's a good
conclude
point.
if I can conclude that in my apartment in Maine, then that makes me think that, my first take is like, oh, these idiots, why are they telling us they're bringing the nukes? Well, then they're probably not idiots. There's probably a reason for that, and it's, whatever the face value thing, that's often not the answer. So
Yeah.
then they want us to know.
Yeah.
That
And some news sites are already reporting that Prigozhin's troops are going to be housed not far from where the nuclear weapons are housed. So
yeah,
it's like, what?
yeah, it's like we just saw this whole fucking fake coup.
Yeah.
And admittedly myself, just a week ago, I took a hook, line, and sinker. I was like, oh shit, here we go.
Oh yeah, I believed it too. In real
Yeah,
time, you don't have
yeah,
time. In real time, you're caught up in the moment, and you're caught up with your hope that the war will end, that there'll be peace, that
yeah,
that Putin will
yeah.
be removed from
It's
power, that he's been
exciting.
weakened.
It's yeah,
Yeah, you want to believe that, and but the thing is that when you sit down and you start soberly considering it, and the way they behave. I mean, there was a famous book written by a Polish journalist years ago. It's called The Triumph of Provocation. He said this is what they do over and over again. They do these provocations, and everybody falls for it.
yeah, yeah. So with that in the rearview mirror, just 7 days, we have to then look at what is allegedly coming in 10 days with the coup fresh in our minds and go, okay, are we going to fall for this next? What podcast are Jeff and I doing on July 18th going, boy, oh boy, I didn't know that XY, like what else is happening? What are we not seeing? And then even more zoomed out, is that the intent is to make you just everything is smoke and mirror? The Soviet Union's what is just a forest of mirrors. Is that what all of this, like, what are we even missing? Like, why is this the headline? Why are they moving the troops there? Why are they building the barracks there? Why are they maintaining? And then why are they telling us about it? I mean, nukes, that's like the highest state secret you can have. And it all starting to. And then, now that I look at it more, the 6.2 billion missing, it's like, oh, that was for Prigozhin. And then it's like, if that was really for Prigozhin, we would have never heard about the 6.2 billion. The CIA doesn't have to come clean and go, hey guys, sorry, we made it. No, they're the CIA. They're fucking spooks. They don't need to tell you shit.
Well, here's another wrinkle. If I'm the FSB or the SVR, if I'm the Russian military intelligence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have Prigozhin reach out to the CIA.
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
I'm going to have him reach out to the SBU. I'm going to
flesh out
have
those
him
lines.
right,
Find out
and
the
so
traitor lines.
then I'm going to actually, and then he's going to say, I want to
and
defect
then
or something
fake the
like that.
coup and take the money anyway.
Right.
Game theory coup.
And so you basically you could set up the CIA to be framed for the whole thing.
if you're going to do the fake coup anyway, if you're
Yeah.
doing the shit anyway, and they committed, right? Because they shot down a couple Russian planes. So if you're losing actual Russian soldiers now, and if you're doing the thing, if you're going to the store anyway, get all the other groceries. We're already there. Let's try to find some CIA assets that each asset is who knows how many thousands and millions of dollars of man hours, and get the money. Why not?
All they have to do is find Maxwell Smart.
Yeah.
And get him on the shoe phone.
Yeah.
and and tell him, look, we got this great deal for you. Why don't you help us out? We want to overthrow Mr. Putin and end this war. And how many people I think the Ukrainians are too smart to fall for something like that. I hope they are. But because they had lived in a Soviet country, most of those people know about all this and they know to stay away from it.
Yeah. Not
But
here in
but the
America
CIA,
where,
no,
yeah,
not in
no.
America, they
Here in
don't.
America, no, we saw January 6th and everyone's like, it's real. And it's like, and then now it's like, yeah, dude, that was a fucking provocation on top of a provocation that was a, so yeah, no, I mean, this is like, they're going, why would you not pull out all the stops? You're doing the thing anyway.
Right, right. And of course, you look at how Russia is getting desperate, and if they have to play the nuclear card, which is the last card they've got left, the Russians have gone through, by some accounts, 200,000 dead and wounded. They have their military is full of recruits who are not well trained. Their officer, they've lost by one count. One guy told me they've lost 150 general officers and colonels in this war. That's a lot of higher level officers, unit commanders, brigade commanders, division commanders, corps commanders. It's a lot of people to have lost in this war, and that's a lot of talent. It takes 2 years to train a division commander. So if you lose a division commander and you got no backup, it's going to take you 2 years before you find somebody that can even begin to know what to do because of the education. I mean, people don't understand how complex even a division is. A division would be like 3 brigades,
Mm-hmm.
right? Three regiments in the old Russian system. That is a crazy thing. They are literally, they have been so their tactics have been so wrong. Their strategies have failed so bad. They lost the Battle of Kiev. They lost the Battle of Kherson. They suffered the Ukrainian impromptu counteroffensive in the north in September, and now they're enduring the Ukrainian offensive, the offensive. Um, and You can tell they are panicked because they blew the Kakhovka Dam. Because if they were confident that they could defend, they wouldn't blow it. And then they've mined, according to Ukrainian sources, and I believe them. President Zelensky and the head of the GRU made the statement that that they have placed 4 mines in the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. They've mined 4 of their reactors. If I understand correctly, there are 4 mines there, and already the Ukrainians are organizing people for protection against radiological hazard, because you blow up a nuclear power plant, that is a fission
Yeah.
process that's very dirty, and you could have contamination. They've urged people within a 16-mile radius to leave. The Russian troops are preparing to leave that area. Something's going, and it's not just that. There's a chemical plant, a very nasty chemical plant in north west Crimea that has allegedly been mined. And the Russians, just for good measure, there's also a story, not confirmed, that they have mined the Kursk nuclear power plant, which is really close. It's on the Russian side of the Ukrainian border, but it's pretty close to Ukraine. So that in case Ukrainian troops try to cross into Russia, they can blow that up and block their advance. I mean, isn't that pretty desperate? When you're not going to rely on your army to stop the enemy. You're going to rely on flooding rivers by breaking dams and blowing up nuclear power plants to create radioactive areas that the enemy troops don't want to transit. I mean, that's crazy desperate. That
Yeah.
is so desperate, in fact, and so nasty that, don't you think someone in that frame of mind is ready to use an
Yeah.
actual nuke,
Yeah.
as long as they can create plausible deniability in using it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then is it just madman theory where they want, or does he want everyone to think he's that crazy? But Jeff, you know what time it is. I gotta go to the bathroom. So welcome
Okay,
welcome
you're
to
gonna
Jeff
go to.
Cast.
Oh no, not the Jeff cast. Yeah. But Yeah, my website is jrnyquist.blog. That's jrnyquist.blog. And you can buy my books on Amazon. I write under the J.R. Nyquist, Nyquist. If you go to Amazon, I have books there like The Fool and His Enemy, which is like, that's my favorite book that I've written. And The Lies We Believe In is another one. And then there's the books that I did with Cliff Kincaid, Back from the Dead, Return of the Evil Empire, and Red Jihad. And so those are some of my books. And then there's the new Tactics of Global War that I did with Benjamin Baruch that you can order. And so check out the books that I have on Amazon. And it's reading is a very key thing. And a lot of these books, I've got footnotes in there so you can see where I got my information from. My website, jrnyquist.blog. I usually, most of my articles, my in-depth articles, I have a large section of notes, links and notes where I put where I got everything. So you can check out the books and the websites that I've gotten the information from. And a lot of times I believe that that you just don't report things. You need to analyze them because there's a lot of facts that if they're not put in the right context, the people will misunderstand what they mean. So you have to give an in-depth analysis of things. And I write about topics. I typically cover the threat from Russia and China and the threat of communism. I talk about philosophy, but I also have written about this whole UFO thing that's breaking now. Ross Coulthart is the guy that interviewed this, what is his name? John Grush, government official who claims that we have alien bodies and craft. So I also cover that. Things that have a sort of larger significance for our country and the world and national security, and have implications for our future. So that's what I basically cover on my website. So, all right,
Back to TommyCast.
you're
So,
back.
so at a certain point, appeasement, historically doesn't work. But at a certain point, are you looking at an increasingly desperate Russia that that we're hypothesizing right now? It's one thing if the
No,
Taliban or Al Qaeda gets more desperate, you're like, whatever, just bomb them. But when you have Russia, who's very competent,
yeah.
at
Well,
what point do we start to look at and we go, how much do we really give a shit about Ukraine? Just, I
yeah.
mean, just objectively, if you're in the
Well,
national security apparatus.
the news was this morning, and I think there's been people in other NATO countries that are following similar threads that I'm not the only one that has noticed some of this. You know that intelligence people are connecting some of these dots, and you know that they're in Europe. And so there was a meeting, I understand, in Denmark, either yesterday, was it yesterday or earlier today, and they came out and they said, well, we want to organize, we want a peace conference, basically. And they want the peace conference in the next several weeks. They said next month. Well, if the meeting was yesterday, next month is this month, is July. So there are already people, politicians, actors who want to negotiate an end to the war. They don't want it to get to this. There is a commentary worth doing on the Prigozhin mutiny and as a provocation or not, and the general competence of the Russian Federation regime. And this is very interesting. You know that you're dealing with I when I look at Putin, people say, well, he fancies himself an amateur historian. And as I've been reading another biography of Putin, following him, he is not a brilliant man. And people have claimed he is a brilliant man. He is sort of a personality, a political personality that was designed to fill this role when Yeltsin, drunken Boris, had exhausted his usefulness in extracting concessions from the West. And just to give you background of how sincere Boris was as a Democrat, my friend, the late Colonel Stanislav Lunev, related how he was the deputy head of the GRU in the U.S. and his boss when the Soviet Union fell, and America was sending food. They were sending chicken to the Russian people. The Russian people like certain cuts of chicken, and I think they were calling them was it Bush wings, because named after President Bush for sending this chicken to the Russian people. And Colonel Lunev's thought was, well, why are we now spying on the Americans, doing these operations against the Americans here when they're feeding us and they're our friends now? And so his boss sent a cable to the headquarters of Russian, KGB foreign intelligence, and said, well, do we suspend our operations now that America's our friend? And the reply came back from Moscow, no, you are going to redouble your operations against America.
Yeah.
That was when Yeltsin was, so Yeltsin comes in and you're redoubling your operations against America. So that meant Yeltsin was a kind of deception in himself. And although they lost control of some things, they were reorganizing their regime. And they, Lev Timofeyev, this is a great little book called Russia's Secret Rulers. And it came out many years ago. And Lev Timofeyev was a great researcher. And he said, what is going on here? What is the fall of the Soviet Union? And he said, look, it looks to me, and he has all this testimony about how it was organized and how the KGB was involved and how organized crime was brought into it. And he said, either the organized criminals took over Russia or it's the old Soviet KGB structures using organized crime to front for them in creating a new kind of system, but that the old communist apparatchiks are still in charge of everything. He says it's either or. Now, we can answer that question definitively now, which it is, because the regime there is not just some ordinary criminal regime. Putin sent 25 million tons of wheat to Cuba, a communist country, because there's a grain shortage. He wanted to make sure the communist country had enough grain. They sent scientists and military advisors to North Korea. North Korea is sending artillery shells to the Russians now in the war. And now they've caught China sending weapons to Russia disguised as consumer goods. So, and you've got China and Russia working together to put communist regimes in power in Latin America, like we see Lula da Silva in.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what did Putin do when Lula da Silva beat Bolsonaro in the election, supposedly beat him in the election? Who gives Lula a call to congratulate him? Putin. So Putin is General Laura Richardson, the head of Southern Command, 4-star American general, she's made a couple of statements, very outspoken, and said the Russians and Chinese are moving into Latin America, and they're putting their friends in, and who are their friends? Daniel Ortega, Raul Castro, the communists in Venezuela, and the new far leftist regime in Chile. And you've got the new president in Colombia, and of course you've got a bit of a situation in Peru. But they elected a communist to the presidency of Peru. They impeached him, but it's sort of like a quarrel between two communist groups, just about. And so it's Latin America is being taken over by communists. Africa, or sub-Saharan Africa, already has been taken over by communists, and it's very interesting to watch. Here's another telltale: the German foreign minister, Ms. Baerbock, goes to Brazil. Now, she's a leftist. She's a Green Party leftist. So she's part of the left. She's aligned with the Social Democrats. They're in a coalition government in Germany. She goes to visit Lula in Brazil, and Lula gives her a cold shoulder. Foreign minister won't meet her. President of Brazil won't meet her. Some low-level advisor meets with her. She's snubbed. Now, it was reported in the German press, I just read it last week, she goes to South Africa. The ANC is, of course, just a front for the Communist Party of South Africa. She goes there, and they give her a cold shoulder. And it's like, I think Ramaphosa did end up meeting with her, but he kind of stood her up at first, and she was embarrassed. And in the German press is saying, look at how they treat our foreign minister. She's like a joke now. Well, no, these are communist regimes. Why are they giving her a cold shoulder? Because she's against Putin. She's been helping Ukraine. She's pro-Ukrainian. So she's a girl of the left who would expect to be received warmly by her leftist confederates in those countries, but no, she misstepped because they're left communist and she was just left environmentalist, and she went against the big boy in Moscow. So that kind of clarifies, what is it, the mafia in charge of Russia, or the old communist structures are still in charge? The old communist structures are in charge because they're working with the communists globally. They're receiving help from them. They're giving help to them. And they're allied with China, the biggest communist power in the world. So I think we can read this. If we want to analyze it, we can analyze it and read it very clearly. We were kind of fooled back in the 1990s, and this regime has sucked a lot of aid and technology out of us. But thank goodness,
Brilliant.
thank goodness, well, it's billions and billions, and the Chinese have done even a better job of this. But what's interesting is they're so darn incompetent. Now I'm going to explain how wonderfully brilliant their trick was, and how really they've outwitted themselves. Because you look at this coup, Stalin, Felix Dzerzhinsky, Stalin, Lenin, Khrushchev, even Brezhnev would have never, ever done this kind of thing. And here's why they would never have done it. You never make a fake military mutiny against your own country, against your own government as a provocation. You know why? Because what happens if everybody joins it? What happens if
Well,
10 generals joined it and you had 250,000 troops? Now the 8,000
now
or
you have
20,000
Prigozhin who's
mercenaries,
going, maybe I do take it.
it's like the little Japanese man in Hiroshima who was sitting on the toilet right when the bomb went off, and his house blows down around him, and he says, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
what have I done?
yeah. It's it's if if I'm having you shoot an apple off my head, it's like, well, I think
Yeah,
Jeff's my
that's
ally, but
yeah, right.
I hope
Yeah.
I don't. What if he goes low? What
So,
if
so uh, I would say, and this is true across the board, I think that all of civilization around the world is in decline, and the decline is intellectual, and it's a decline in competence. So I'll give you an example. You could compare Biden to FDR, and you would find Biden very much lower on the scale. You know all those pictures where they show the evolution of man from little monkeys, and they show
hmm
little Anthropocene,
Yeah.
Tithescenes, or whatever. They show the little monkeys, and they go, and then it's man, and it's Cro-Magnon man, and it's modern
Yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you could have this little evolutionary. It's a de-evolutionary thing where you got Washington and you got Lincoln, and they're getting smaller. You're getting William McKinley and Woodrow Wilson and FDR, and then you get down to Biden, and he's just this tiny little guy, right? Like the monkey at the beginning of the other. He's the
Sure.
monkey. Only you're not evolving, you devolving, right? So, so, so if you look at Mr. Putin is no Stalin. He's no Lenin. This guy does not have the brain power of a Lenin or Stalin, and so when he may be a decent actor or performer in front of a camera, but when you look at actually his choices, these strategic choices, these are they criticize Khrushchev for harebrained scheming, but this is one harebrained scheme after. They invade Ukraine thinking they're going to overrun it in a matter of days or weeks, and they get stuck in there. They're going to be in there for a year and a half pretty soon if this keeps going on. And that's what you call a long war. And then to get out of the war, they blow this dam and create this eco catastrophe, which it's so darn dumb because now the water is low in the old channel in twice the length of the river. There's twice as many crossing points now than before that reservoir was emptied. Because that giant reservoir that took up, a third of the river downstream from Zaporozhye wasn't crossable. This is like this gigantic lake. And now it's so they just put themselves in a worse position. And so now they do this mutiny, and Putin looks weak, but is that really helpful to his regime to look weak? I mean, it's great for getting him out of trouble with the West, but how does that stabilize him at home?
Hmm.
So in a way, he's always shooting himself in the foot. And there's this law of unintended consequences. You go for a short war. Your intention is to integrate Ukraine back into your country, but you attack Ukraine, you make the Ukrainian people so mad at you that they will never integrate. Even if you conquered them, they would be unwilling subjects. You would have this terrible occupation, guerrilla warfare. You'd have all kinds of problems there. You're not going to be able to get the Ukrainian aerospace engineers to be contractors to help the strategic rocket forces of the Russian Federation anymore, because they're going to leave. They're going to go to Europe. They're going to go to Romania and Poland and Germany, and they're going to go somewhere else. So you have just lost what you were trying to recover. So everything you're doing is destroying your own, the whole reason for you doing it is destroyed in the way you're doing it. So, so it's really a sign of incompetence when statesmen do things that are obvious reaching for things they want, and then they get the opposite of what they want by reaching for it. It's like, well, you reached for it in the wrong way. You wanted to win Ukraine over to become part and have union with Russia. Well, I think maybe bombing their cities and killing their women and children and committing massacres is kind of the wrong way to go about it. Like they're ever gonna, 100 years from now, Ukrainians will probably still hate Russians because they'll all remember their granddads who fought in the war, right? They're going to know their granddads and great granddads, and they're going to know the story of the suffering, and they're going to have the pictures of the cities leveled, and they're going to be living with the pollution and the destruction. I mean, do you realize that from Chernobyl, radioactive silt settled at the bottom of that reservoir and got buried in that Kakhovka Dam? When they released the dam, the silts got blown out and have washed downriver. So they're saying there may be radioactive silts down. I mean, think about the disaster that you have just done. You had no idea what the implications are and how people are going to hold you responsible later. So then you go to this, any kind of scheme of using nuclear weapons to get out of this. You know, everybody isn't stupid. When there's something about what somebody once said that you know, a death really focuses the mind. Right. So when you're dealing with something very deadly, a lot of these Western people go, I get it. I get what they're doing. This can't be, this Prigozhin thing is phony baloney. They're not going to believe that this, and even the Russian people aren't in the end going to believe that Putin sent Prigozhin into exile in Belarus and he just happened to send him where the nukes are. If that is what happens, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'm a little concerned seeing these things line up. I mean, maybe he just sent him there because he then can guard Lukashenko and preserve his unstable government. That could be why he's there. And then they get us to feel afraid because there's this implication. So they're just trying to make a sophisticated form of threat. But it seems to me that they're going to lose the war. They're going to lose this war, and there's a real threat of destabilization of the Russian Federation in the loss of the war. And that's definitely what the threat is. So nuclear way out or not, I don't know. I mean, they're incompetent enough and murderous enough to do it. And so I don't attach this great genius to Mr. Putin. And I don't, by the way, I think Mr. Xi is a degenerate form of Mao, and Mao was already a degenerate. But that's the way I see Mr. Xi. And so you look at the leaders. I mean, in World War II, you had a lot of ruthless people: Churchill, Hitler, Tojo, Roosevelt. They were all of these guys had reputations for, you know, not necessarily being nice. You know,
Sure.
Churchill had a reputation as a warmonger. Roosevelt had a reputation of being a dishonest politician. Stalin was a mass murderer. Tojo, we all know about him. And of course, Hitler, very, very famous bad guy, right? So you got these, but you know what? All of these people were kind of formidable in their own way, bad or not. But now what we have is bad and really maybe a retarded form of bad. You know,
which is almost worse.
Yes, because there was some, look, if people are rational, you can have if people are
you can
rational,
deal with a mob boss.
well, right. You can actually say, well, look, there is a kind of rational process there that you can,
preservation, money.
yeah,
whatever.
you're trying to preserve something, right? You may be doing a lot of horrible things, but something is preserved, and the world got through all that. Somehow we got through it, we rebuilt. But these people, I mean, I don't know. You know, Biden is so irresponsible and so corrupt. I mean, he just makes the irresponsibility and the corruption of FDR look like it was really nothing by comparison. And you know, and as far as allowing Marxists into the government, you look at Obama. I mean, everything is an iteration of the past, only each iteration is more of a drooling idiot. That's until you get somebody who is absolutely, you know, it's what is that? What was that movie?
Idiocracy.
Idiocracy. Yeah. A Republic of Dunces, right?
Yeah.
And I'm afraid we're headed. That's where we've been headed all this time.
You know, but even that kind of you can find the silver lining in that, because if we really are being ruled by these retards, then as they get dumber and more inept, it would stand to reason that they would be easier to overcome. Right? A sufficiently competent person could look at it and game them and put them out of power. Right? If we're talking about them getting dumber and dumber and dumber, you could have a class of smart people come along and go, "Oh yeah, we can take this. These people are stupid."
Yeah, there's there's a very interesting, and I think, evil is a special case of stupid. I've made this argument before, and this is why, you have the argument between Sun Tzu and Clausewitz, right? Sun Tzu said, excellence in war is winning without fighting, and so it's all about deception. Because
Yeah.
if you deceive them, then, okay, so that a lot of people think that's brilliant, and of course, I've read Sun Tzu. There's a lot of brilliant insights in there, but then you got Clausewitz, and Clausewitz begins his book on war by saying that he says some people think that excellence, in warfare is winning without fighting, but this is an error which must be extirpated. So he kind of attacks that whole idea at the outset.
Yeah.
And he says war is politics by other means.
Yeah, just a
And
continuation.
and of course, Clausewitz is this honorable Prussian officer who comes out of the European traditions of chivalry that gave birth to the Prussian officer corps and the British officer corps and so on, and other countries. And George Washington and the Duke of Wellington all read that same code of honor out of the British officer manuals that taught them how to behave. And you read the letters of Wellington when he was in India, admonishing an officer that the Indian, some Raja, was trying to bribe, right? And saying, we're British, we don't take bribes, right? We're honorable. This is the difference between us and these people in Asia, that they have this corrupt culture, they take bribes. So it's like, why was the West superior for so long? Because going back to the Romans, who believed in honor, right? And the ancient Greeks and even the ancient Persians. In ancient Persia, the greatest crime was to lie, to always be truthful. The ancient Persians, the original Persians, when you go to Cyrus the Great, they were great people because they believed in this Spartan honesty, right? This massive honesty that trust. And this is a theme in Western history: honor, honesty, integrity, chivalry, that is embedded. And of course, we've degenerated. We've gone away from this, assassinating your enemy who's not on the battlefield, like they did to that Iranian general there in January 2020. I wrote arguments. This is shocking to me. You do not assassinate your enemy general off the battlefield, especially when he's going to a parley. You don't do that. This is what, and so think about Western history and how much we've achieved with the idea of honor, and think about China and Sun Tzu. China ended up becoming a sewer politically with this Sun Tzu nonsense, because Sun Tzu is just Machiavelli on steroids. It's just massively cynical. So what is your politics? What is your politics if it's based on lies? Nothing is forthright. Nobody's saying what they really think. Everybody is deviously plotting against everybody else. It's all this subtlety, right? So there's a problem there. And I think that the idea of adopting these Eastern political ways, these Chinese politics, is terribly damaging. And I think it's been damaging for Russia. And I think it's, again, there is a stupidity in evil. There's a stupidity in cynicism, because cynicism is kind of, in a way, it's a kind of stupidity that won't acknowledge there is good in the world and won't be able to ever take advantage of that good. So what can a cynic do? Nothing positive, only negative. So what's the good of cynicism? It's no good, right? And so what's the good of believing that you have to lie and deceive to get ahead? And more to the point, to what Clausewitz would say, is he said, okay, you try to trick me all you want, and I'm going to hold on to my gun. And when I realize you're tricking me over and over again, I'm just going to pull out my gun and I'm going to bang, shoot you. So in the end, it's like the Wild West. You're going to pull your gun out and one of you is going to die. It's about a bloody resolution. This is what Clausewitz's whole thing is about. It's the bloody fight that it comes down to. You can play this game of a Russian girl
dancing and fucking musical chairs. It comes down to who's got a gun.
It comes down to actually fighting it out. And the thing is, who's got the grit and who's got the courage? And you look at the Ukrainians with the grit and the courage. And here you've got this regime in Moscow that is always cheating and lying and prevaricating. And look at their soldiers don't want to even be there. Their morale is low. Why? Because the soldiers don't see honor above them in the power vertical, as they call it in Moscow. The power vertical, there's this little rat at the top of it named Putin, Vladimir Putin, who lies even when it doesn't make sense to lie.
Yeah.
You know, you ask him what time it is, he probably give you the wrong hour just to keep in
Just
practice.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, how do you, and see, for you to have, you think of an army, you think of a military unit, you're going to follow a guy who lies to you, or are you going to follow the guy who's going to put his life on the line for you, and he's going to
Yeah.
tell you the truth, and he's going to treat you with dignity? That's who you're going to fight and die for.
Yeah.
And I think the
Yeah.
Ukrainians have learned that lesson, breaking from the Soviet past.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with the Clausewitzian, I guess,
Yeah.
ideal of like it does just come down to the gun. It just
It comes down, you know, and the one communist, Mao Zedong, said it, political power comes from the barrel of a
barrel of a
gun.
gun.
So Mao, but of course, Mao was a smarter, old-fashioned Marxist, and Karl Marx read Clausewitz. Karl
Yeah.
Marx and Lenin believed that Clausewitz was the man, not Sun Tzu.
Yeah.
And so even Mao, who had a largely Western education in many regards, he had a very classical Chinese education too, but he knew all these Western works. And so the older Bolsheviks, they knew, but they fought. The older Bolsheviks, they did use deception, but they knew how to fight these bloody civil wars in World War II and so on. But
Yeah.
these guys, you look at these guys and you think, no, no, they are totally devotees of this, you know, tell a lie. And so you're going to lie to accomplish everything. You're going to find out in the end, you have become hoisted by your own petard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's fiat currency,
Mhm.
right? It's
Yeah,
at the end of the
it's
day,
false
it's
coin. It's false
yeah.
coin.
Well, even then, at the end of the day, it's like even the gold doesn't matter. It's, do you have grain? Do you have water? Do you have shelter? Do you have a gun? And that is
Mhm.
kind of the and there are benefits to fiat currency. There are benefits to lying and deception, but ultimately, it does. The universe has a funny way of manifesting karma.
Yeah, it does. And there's a famous Italian economist slash sociologist named Vilfredo Pareto, and he wrote a book called The Mind and Society, actually a 3-volume work, or is it 4 volumes? And it's very fascinating to read it, because he basically says he has his theory of the circulation of elites. That's the background of this, and he says there's basically two personality types, two genetic types, or whatever, however he frames it. It's the lion and the fox, which Machiavelli wrote about in The Prince. And Machiavelli had said in The Prince that you have to be a lion to chase away the wolves, and you have to be a fox to avoid traps. So you need to be both a lion and a fox, and you could see where this is heading. That is, there's those that are strong and will fight, and the foxes, of course, is tricky and clever and deceptive. And Pareto made this general observation about history and these human types. He says at the beginning of civilization, the lions predominate in the leadership of society over the foxes. That is, bravery and honor is more. And he pointed to the Roman Republic, the rise of the Roman Republic, where you have these great soldiers, statesmen in the Roman Republic that, you know, many of them died in battle, and they led the Roman soldiers, and they built Roman Italy, and then they built the Roman Empire, and then the Republic collapsed. And then he said, then what happens is, as it becomes senile, as it becomes old, the foxes become more numerous in the leadership. So you have your Sejanuses, and you have your emperor, you know, your wily emperors like Tiberius and Nero and so on, people who are really cowards, who aren't really lions, but foxes. And all of a sudden the foxes predominate. And where does it end up? You end up bribing the barbarians, because you can't fight them anymore. You don't have the grit. You just want to negotiate everything and trick people in the negotiation. I was amused after reading Pareto. I was reading the letters of a Roman diplomat at the time of Attila the Hun,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on a military mission there, and he ran into this big Hunnish lord, and it turned out he was this old Roman businessman he knew that they thought had been overrun by the Huns and was dead. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, you're alive. How is it that you're still alive?" And he says, "Oh yeah, I got captured by the Huns. I was a vassal, but they recognized my talent, so they made me a lord." And he goes, "Well, now that you're a lord, don't you want to go back to Rome or Constantinople and resume your business?" He goes, "I would never go back there with those awful people. These people are honorable. When they say something, they mean it, and they never lie. I'm going to go back to that viper's nest." So you see, what Pareto was telling us is that the Roman Empire fell because the foxes became predominant, and there were very few lions. And then you look at anybody who has lion-like traits. This is one of the things that Trump kind of presents, a lion-like traits. The foxes just surround him and just do away, that he's stupid, right? The criticism of that the fox has for the lion is he's just stupid. He's just too stupid. As if courage is not a strategy, an intelligent strategy to have. They called Churchill the last lion. Churchill stood up, and all these British politicians, they wanted to have appeasement with Hitler. They wanted to manipulate Hitler and the Soviet Union, so if there was another world war, it would be between the Soviet Union and the Nazis. And in trying to do that, it just backfired on them.
Yeah.
All their cleverness, Stalin outwitted them, and it ended up being Hitler going against the West, with Stalin sitting back laughing at the whole thing. So it's like this is the senility time, and Pareto, who lived 100 years ago, I think he died in the 1920s. Pareto said we are approaching this period of the foxes dominating everywhere, where everything is negotiable and everything is negotiated, and there are fewer lions. And he said eventually what happens is the civilization collapses like Rome did, and we're back to something starting over, and it's all about lions again being on top. It's the cycle of civilizations, the cycle of elites. It's a fascinating theory that Pareto had, and you can kind of see it playing out with our leaders now. It's all about being clever. It's all about negotiating. It's all about, image and everything. But what about the reality? What about the grit? What about the courage? What about taking the bullet? And it wasn't that long ago. Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech in Milwaukee, and someone shot him, and he decided to finish his speech with a bullet in him, right?
Yeah.
So we had lions, and now we have five. Would any politician now do that? No. Nope. Take me to the ER now.
Yeah, but the cycle does, the trough implies the crest, and once people get so sick of foxes, it won't even take a necessarily special lion to stand up. People will just be so attracted to just the opposite of cunning, thievery, and deception. Just anyone that remotely tells the truth. They'll just be like, you don't even care about him. Be like, hey, at least he's honest. Right. So that in a way, the prevalence of the foxes also lowers the bar necessary for a lion to take over.
Yeah, eventually it reaches.
Eventually,
Pareto has an interesting thing. He calls it a period of spoliation, where he says, look, you take a Roman penny at the time of Christ's birth at 4% interest. How much do you have? I think he was writing this in like 1916 or something like that. He says, how much money do you have? He got the measurement of how much gold. The miracle of compound interest is Einstein called it. You would have several times the weight of the earth in gold at 4% interest from the cap. So he said, how come we don't have all this fabulous wealth? How come this has not happened? Well, he said, because there is no such thing as constant growth economic. What you have is you have periods of accumulation and periods of spoliation. And this coincides, by the way, with these elites going bad. The elites become foxes. And what do foxes do? They deceive. They end up stealing all the money. And so nobody can trust anybody. So everybody's, this is kleptocracy in Russia. This is our kind of Bernie Madoff financial culture here. So it turns out, gee, all the funds are empty. All the banks are empty. Oh, gosh, the whole thing just collapses. So then there's nothing left for the foxes to negotiate over or steal. It's time for the lions. Yeah. This is how you end up in the Middle Ages, where the men of honor, what was the aristocracy of Europe was a feudal warrior aristocracy that predicated everything on honor and their fighting ability, not on their using their wits all the time to get everything by tricking people. So it exhausts itself, and it ends in this period of spoliation, he called it. And by every evidence, when we look around, we are headed for this period of spoliation. And the thing that, and all of the great sociologists, by the way, it amounts to this same kind of thing, only each one of them has a different way of modeling it or describing it. But it's the collapse of everything and the beginning again of everything. You find it in Nietzsche, you find it in Jacob Burckhardt, you find it in Joseph Schumpeter, and so you find it in Pareto, and you find it in and Max Weber alluded to. So they've all of these people who've read history going back 2,500 years or more. Well, 2,500 years history has been written since Herodotus. They can see this pattern in the ancient world. The ancient world was a civilization that rose and fell, that we have pretty good idea of what happened. And now we can look at our civilization and go, holy crap, we're following in their footsteps. We're doing it again. It's not exact, but as they say, it rhymes. And it is very true. So I think that's where we are. And so when you hear these analysts come on and say, well, it's the rational actor model, and Putin's acting very rational, and the Americans are acting very rational, and the Germans are, it's like, you're fighting in Ukraine. Does it seem very rational to you?
Yeah.
It's pretty darn crazy what's happening. Blowing up dams, preparing for nuclear war, mining the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. That's insane.
Yeah.
But yet these people would want to convince us that it's all very rational. It's going to be managed perfectly fine. No, it's not. You are some kind of weird optimist if you believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, I say with that, we wrap this one up.
Very good.
That was dude, as always, I appreciate you coming on here. That was a we will see. July
We'll
11th,
see.
then,
Yeah.
if
We'll see.
if that is the nuclear holocaust, then Jeff, it was nice knowing you. But I imagine we'll be doing an episode after that. And
I think if there is any nuke going off, it might be just a couple of them, and maybe not even that.
a little,
Maybe
a
it's
little,
just a scare. Maybe they're just trying
a
to
little baby nuclear
they're
war.
just trying to scare us.
Oh
It
God.
could be that they're just because people can put these things together and get all scared and whatever. And so I'm thinking, you got to be an open mind. Prigozhin might be there just to defend Lukashenko and stabilize that regime. Who knows?
Yeah, whatever it is, it's not what we saw. I
Nope,
think that much
it's
is. I
not.
think
Yeah,
I think everyone's kind of concluding that it's
yeah.
not what we saw. But yo, dude, let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Jeff, thank you as always. Guys, please go in the description. Please go to his Twitter. Please go buy his books. And happy Independence Day, my friend. Till next time.
Happy 4th. All right.
Thank you so much. Jeff,
Take
always a
care.
pleasure, dude. Guys,
All
thank
right.
you for watching.